Our next session this afternoon will feature Stetson University head coach Steve Trimper, Navy head coach Chuck Restano, head coach at Middlebury College Mike Leonard, and Loomis Chaffee head coach Donnie McKillop. This session's title is The Changing Recruiting Landscape, What You Need to Know. This session will be moderated by Wayne Mazzoni, recruiting expert and former Division I pitching coach. Please welcome them to the stage.
All right, hopefully all the sound works. I'm really excited and honored to be at the stage with these guys, excellent coaches, but getting to hang around with them outside of this, they're even better people. So this is really enjoyable. Obviously, what's going to come up a lot is all this changing landscape, and Trimp and I have caught each other in 10-minute increments talking about all the stuff that's going on. What I'm going to do to start this off is kind of talk about recruiting as it's always the things that always need to happen, how coaches find players. I want to talk about that to start with. I'm sure as we discuss that, a lot of the changing landscape will come up. Certainly part of this talk will cover really what's going on in present day and how that's affecting the kids that you coach and the high school kids. But start off with this, I'm going to ask Mike first, then Chuck, then Steve, and then turn it to Donnie's side, working with the high school kids that are on the opposite side of this question. But obviously, every kid that's on a college roster got found. They went from an unknown to a known. They got evaluated, and then the recruiting process started. So I'll start with you, Mike. How do you find these kids? How does Middlebury and you and your staff go about going from a kid that you don't know about? How does this kid get on your radar screen to then you evaluate and ultimately recruit?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of everything. It's kind of an all of the above, right? So you kind of put all these buckets together. It's the player outreach, right? The dear coach, I'm Johnny Smith, and I'm from this high school. Here's my video, right? That player gets into our system, and sometimes we follow up more with them, right? There's enough that's there that's of interest, and they end up in our recruiting pipeline. Sometimes it's a phone call from a high school coach, right? Someone that we've built a relationship with. They give us a call every single year, and here are the juniors that I have. Sometimes it's a summer coach, a travel coach. Sometimes it's just a friend who coaches at a different level, right? Those are some of my favorite, recommendations that I get, when I'm able to get a call from, Trimp on a guy, or, Chuck, you're welcome to call me anytime on somebody that maybe isn't a fit for you. But I think sometimes those cross checks, the Division I, coaches have a bigger pool of assistants that are out there. There's more interest from players to play at the Division I level, and there's not enough spots for them. So I think oftentimes that passing along a name from a friend. And I will say, there's also kind of these buckets of, the showcase, the PBR events, the whatever it might be, these independent events where players go. We do see players at those, right? And those are helpful. And I think the last thing that we're certainly in right now, but I would say I am not in as directly as my assistants, is just the landscape of social media, right? So you can see baseball footage from any player anywhere in the world, right? They have access to a camera and they can post it right there. So I do think there's this space of following players and communicating with them, where you just see them kind of out in the open, that they're posting to the public, and there's some interest right there. So it's a little bit of everything. And I think I'll close with just saying, there's not a blueprint to a player that says, I want to play college baseball at Middlebury College. What are the steps I need to follow? It just doesn't work like that. It's just a little bit of everything. Everybody's path is different. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but I would say you've got to be kind of in one of those pipelines to get started, to end up there.
Certainly, that was a perfect start to this. Chuck, from the Navy perspective, what are the things that may happen at Navy that may not happen at a standard school?
Sure. Going to a service academy, you have to account for things like the physical assessment, getting through DODMER, the Department of Defense Medical Review Board. Does somebody have allergies? Do you have to consider if they have additional time for tests? All of these, the specificity is something we confront. That said, we have kind of the same, like Trimp and like Mike, we're out evaluating. And usually the first thing we see is, can a guy play? We don't have access often to the complete academic picture, the interest, the variable of, hey, do you want to come serve our country? But we all have specific elements, and ours is, I assume most of you know what goes on at the Naval Academy, but until I worked there for a while, I didn't know the detail of it and the chase for excellence. I think we've hit and missed on everything from the kid who just sent us the unsolicited email We both hit and miss there, to our most trusted resource in Florida or California or Texas, recommending a guy that ultimately didn't work out. I would say when you do call us and recommend a player, I would just ask that you know a little bit about our program and how we do things. And, you know, for all of our institutions, I mean this with the highest degree of humility. You telling me he's the greatest kid in the world at our places is not a separating property. Everybody at the Naval Academy or at any of these places was somebody's best kid. That just gets you in, like that just gets you in the door. Every midshipman, every hatter, right? So I expect that to be an absolute. If you have to tell me on how good of a kid he is, you're probably not telling me much about what type of player he is. And we are all, Trimp is dealing with the draft a lot more than I am, but we are all trying to recruit the highest level young man that can help us win championships and make some noise in the NCAA tournament, regardless of the specificity of the institutional experience. But that's my 2 cents.
Perfect. Trim, from your perspective, your program is growing so much. You've done a great job. Facilities, you're becoming a top 50, 60 type program. The way you recruited when you took the job has to be different now in terms of how you find out about these kids or who you're looking at.
Yeah, I think Mike said it really well. What stuck out to me right away was, just the staff alone. I have 3 full-time recruiters that are going out. We didn't have that in college baseball 7 years ago. Now, you have a third assistant that's out recruiting. You have the ability to do those things. And I will tell you that we still value a lot the high school recruit. I think as you start climbing up to the 49th program and the 38th program, this whole crazy world, which we're probably going to talk about in a second, about portal and all those things, just for maybe, giggles here. But, we still value that. I will tell you, we're probably recruiting less high school guys because of that window that we have to keep open. And then you throw the whole added, talk now about roster limitations and the opting in and opting out. You hear in ESPN articles that affects Division I athletics. It's going to affect rosters as we go forward. But we still do value the high school guy. Mike said it right. Like, I come to this thing for 22 years because I see this group of coaches that it happened to me 12 times. Hey, man, I'm up in Vermont. I got a 6'8", kid that's throwing 88. He's a sophomore. First thing I say to him is like, where's he playing next summer when I'm not coaching that I can have my guys go see, or if I can see, or can he visit? We still do the whole prospect camp kid. We got a kid that's going to start for us probably one of the games in our opening weekend that came to our spring prospect camp last year, a local kid that's 30 minutes away that wanted to go to Stetson so bad. And we're like, no. And then he came to our camp and I'm like, this kid hits bombs and he can't throw and he runs really well, but he had a tremendous fall. And like, he just kind of showed up and was like, he kept at it with us and he kept putting himself in front of us. So I think that's, we still do the old way of come to a prospect camp, come show us up. But with the opportunities now of all these travel ball teams and what's going on this summer, you just can't get to all these events. Like, it's crazy how many things they put out there as moneymakers. I get it. They got business run, but the 3 of us can't go to all these things. And now add in at least what I'm doing, the portal and the summer leagues. And this is a terrible stat that I had to do this year. I saw 0 high school kids this summer, and I recruited the most I've ever done in my career, ever. I spent 35 days in the Cape and the NECBL and the Valley League, didn't go home, And so that's like kind of the difference of what's going on now that, we've opened ourselves up to with this NIL and this portal craziness. So
I mean, just to repeat that, it's the most you've recruited in a long time, and you saw no high school kids.
I didn't see a high school kid. I had 3 guys out going to Perfect Game and Lake Point, and any kind of things they can go to. I take that back. I stopped in New Jersey and saw my buddies and went to the underclass all-star game one day, but it was on my way to a flight at Newark to go to the Valley League. So it's just changed the demographics. Honestly, guys, talk about this for a second. We'll get into this. Like, the high school kids that we're getting, they're really good players. I'm not saying they're first-round draft picks. We're still not going to get that guy, or they're not going to show up. But they go to Florida or Florida State or Miami or, one of those schools. but we're getting that 4-tool player out of high school. We got a kid in our team from Georgia right now he'll probably start second base for us. And he does 4 things really good. He'll probably be our 5-hitter as a freshman. And the 2023 team that we had that won 35 games and had a really good record, we were really close to a regional year, that had 7 starting freshmen on our level. And we were competing against the portal guys over at Miami and Florida State. There was 5-year difference. Right. And then all those guys played for us last year as sophomores. So we're not afraid to play young guys. It's just that there's so many more opportunities for me now to be like, all right, this guy's in the portal that's throwing 96, that's already been to 2 years of college, that has a 3.5, that knows how to go to class, that checks out from all my checkouts, and he can help us, in this role right now. And there, by the way, there's 3,000 of those guys in there that 400 of them are really good players. So that's the fight that a high school kid has right now. And then, of course, you got this really quick injunction of the Vanderbilt quarterback and the injunctions going on. I mean, we could go on for hours. So I don't know how much we're going to get to, but anyway, long answer to a short question, I guess.
No, and that's why this is a great panel, because everyone's doing their business a little differently, and I think all of us in the room would be doing what you're doing in your position. Donnie, from your side at Loomis, working with kids on the other side, what kinds of things do you advise them, or what are they doing to get seen by these types of schools?
Yeah, I think kind of perfectly when Mike started with there's no blueprint is probably the most important thing that as a high school coach you can say to a student athlete that's asking you some questions to start the conversation. I've been at Loomis since 2017. It's been a great landing spot. Since then we've had 52 kids go off and play as college committed players. That has created college captains, that has created immediate impact kids, that has created kids who haven't made it 1 year. And so as Chuck is saying about, his trusted source, I'm going to send him a guy. One guy's going to go really well for me. It's going to be a guy who was outstanding for me at Loomis, who competed against Division I Founders League play. He might throw really well for him and do really well. He might also not work out at Navy. He might not make it through the first week of their summer. They have to plebe summer. So far we're 2 for 2 on plebe summer. There we go. We've at least nailed that. But one of our guys popped at UCL. We've got to get through him being healthier, right? We just got to be a healthier program. So that's what we struggle with at high school now. There's going to be a lot of different challenges at the high school level for a coach. But I think the moment you can remove your ego from it and what you're doing for the placement and what your fit is the moment that a player is truly going to find a home. And I think from my lens, speaking to high school players, a lot of it is going to be threefold. It's going to be the athletic fit, which is multi-pronged, the academic fit, again, multi-pronged, and then the financial fit. And so from the circumstances of a player and their family and where they're coming from, what that family is chasing, what that player is chasing, that should educate you as a coach to then hunt down the other parts of it. And then with that information, equip the player to self-advocate, equip the family to make decisions together, equip them to understand who the travel coach is in the region, who the high school coach is in the region, who's being paid to tell them how good they are, who's not being paid that's going to give you honest feedback. When you reach out to a level, right? If a coach says they talked to someone and that coach said something, just forward the text, right? Show me. There's a lot of hidden stuff that goes on in club baseball. There's a couple programs, ask about the training, and the hardest part is the chase and the magic pill. So you're going to be told that this thing's going to get you a certain way, a certain thing, a certain promise. That's not true. And there's going to be calendars that are going to work for everyone at a different rate. And so these guys are going to be looking January 18th. There's going to be camps and prospect showcases. My high school season, I want my pitchers to be ready for February 23rd to throw a 30-pitch live inning. I don't want them on January 18th to go to Navy. I don't want them on January 18th to go to Stetson. My hitters, please go there. Right? Have a blast. Go hit. If you're a pitcher and you want to do PFPs, you want to demonstrate interest, you want to go on a visit, go do an informal visit. But part of that is these coaches need to they need to focus on their in-season stuff in February. So when my guys need to be ready, they should be seen that February. So hopefully March, April, May, that summer, if you guys are doing a good job as high school coaches, being ahead of the communication. And you're right, honestly, when a kid's a freshman, lanky kid right now projects to be D3. We'll see what kind of weight he puts on. And then you write that and you send it along to a coach. You get a lot more credibility than, hey, this is my best freshman. I think he's a Division I player. He will be great at Navy, right? Like there's a very different way of phrasing things that I think the most important thing for high school coaches is ideally equip a kid with someone who's not being paid to tell them how good they are. Ideally, that's you. If you are being paid by them, like get somebody else in their ear too, so they're sharing honest opinions. And then get the feedback, right? Like if Johnny wants to play at Middlebury College, but no one in the NESCAC is writing emails back to Johnny, okay, let's look at some other Division III institutions, right? Just take that as feedback. It might be offensive, right? You as the high school coach might risk losing players. You might send kids to other schools because you're the first person that tells a kid you might be a Division III player. But that is important to do, right? And it's important to keep that kind of character from our end as a high school coach.
Yeah, I've always found if a kid is D1 or bust, they're usually going to bust. If they try to play Division I, which is a great goal, but are happy to find any academic and athletic fit that's right for them, that kid usually will work out, in the end. Kind of switching gears a little bit, Chuck, I'm going to put this to you. When you are actually out recruiting, it's a camp, it's something, your eyes are on this player. You're deciding, do I want this kid for Navy? And whether you want to talk pitching, hitting, or both, what are things you're looking for to evaluate kids?
Well, tangible stuff. I mean, I found to be more aggressive with the hitter at a younger age than I've been with the pitcher. Obviously, there's slam dunks at pitchers that are young and you take a shot on stuff and size and projection, but I feel like the swing is often going to remain the swing. I've had more success with recruiting younger hitters than I have pitchers. You also have the variability in pitching, which obviously you don't win if you don't pitch, that there's a greater chance, I think, like Trimp had the situation where he had a guy come to camp as a high school senior that they didn't think was going to be good enough. I think that's more rare with a hitter than it is a pitcher. I think the pitcher that you maybe gave up on a little too early shows up in October. You say, man, that dude just made a big jump. You've all seen those pitchers. It happens during the course of a college career where somebody goes, I mean, the guy who's going to be the first pitcher taken in the draft at Florida State this year had a 6.5 ERA as a freshman. And he's going to be about an $8 million guy when this is said and done. That race for pitchers, that finish line happens a lot later. I would caution, or I would ask that your pitchers that are becoming impatient in the process, please make sure they know that we'll always need pitchers. So looking at the tangible, the velocity, the stuff, of course important. The tools for the position player, of course important. And I don't mean to give you the answer that you've heard as long as you've been doing this, but it does matter. Like when I look and I see Dad with the radar gun behind the plate, like I don't need it. Like, is Dad an up the line parent or is he a behind the plate parent? That sounds a little silly, but I ask my assistant coaches that. Is that a disqualifying property? No, but it's certainly something that's on my radar. We don't want to deal with that. And Mike and I in particular, like, we got to get the high school guy right. Our transfer door only really swings one way. And the need to be thorough is important. And I think like the next step, like what we're looking for, please, when you call and recommend guys to us, and we love it, like it's our lifeblood, I hope for your candor, and I hope you don't get put off by ours. We can have a difference of opinion and say, man, okay, you think that's going to be an all-conference shortstop for us? I think he's going to play second base. That's not me saying I don't trust you. That's just us having a difference of opinion. And somewhere along the line, somebody didn't recruit Garrett Cole. Somebody didn't recruit Jamie Arnold, the guy I was telling you about from Florida State. So I think that level of mutual respect goes such a long way, because when we find the player we've identified as one we want in our program because of his physical tool set, if we haven't had the conversation yet, the next step is calling you. And where that conversation goes often dictates how far we're going to go with that young man, if that makes sense.
There's so many good things that Chuck just said, but like to harp on two of them. One of them being like that full picture of what you're recruiting, right? So like, yes, there's the physical characteristics of the player. There's like the makeup, like the intangibles, but there's the family too, right? And we have choice as college coaches who we want to invite into our program. And that impact of inviting that player in and that family in is going to have effect on the other people in that program. And I'm just going to be honest, if I'm going to choose to bring someone to my program, if I already know that dad is a little bit of an annoying character, I don't know if I want to go into that place, because at the end of the day, at least for us, I'm not overlapping with Trimp, and LSU and this program for kids, right? I'm not getting this SEC level player or ACC level player to come to Middlebury, right? I've got this pool of like pretty similar abilities. There's a range, and there's some really high level abilities in that range. But at the end of the day, if they're bringing something else with them that's going to tarnish like the experience for others or impact me negatively as a coach, I don't want to deal with that, right? So I think that information is super helpful. And then I love that like Chuck some way validated like what I end up getting with players is like the player who's tall, physical with bat speed, like makes good contact, can run and hit. We don't always get that player. I've been certainly striving for him. I've identified him too. I've emailed and called him, but he's probably got phone calls from other places, right? So we have to kind of look through and be like, all right, where are the skill set gaps and what can we do to kind of overcome some of them? And we've had tremendous success with really physical, really athletic players who have a desire to train and get better, who maybe at the high school level swing and miss too much. Maybe at the high school level haven't quite, worked into that frame, and they don't have like the muscle mass to generate bat speed and power, but we can see them as a 22-year-old looking completely different. And I still do operate off of, a 4-year window with my players, right? It's where they are as a 17-year-old junior going into their senior year when we recruit them, and we're projecting out what are they going to look like as a senior. Because, I love the transfer door swinging one way. Like we're not in the transfer portal. It's just not that type of an institution. It's not that type of recruiting model. So we do kind of look at the 4-year piece. And I will say, like, at the end of it, this is something I think it's important. We get calls from folks and recommendations on players, and it's no fault to the travel coaches and the high school coaches to recommend a kid, because the level of player that played in the NESCAC 10 years ago, with the exception of Donnie McKillop, who still is the gold standard for anyone who's ever played NESCAC baseball and football, Middlebury alum, so can say that. Like, it's different now. The level of play at each level keeps going up, right? And it's probably because at the top level of Division I, there's some older players playing. If you're 23, 24, you're probably better at college baseball than an 18-year-old, right? So the level everywhere goes up. So when someone calls and say, hey, I got a player, I think they're a good D3 player, right? Some of the D3 players from our roster, from our conference over the last couple of years that had grad eligibility, one of them's at East Carolina. One of them went to Cal. One of them's possibly going to start for UConn this year. One of them went to University of Washington. Like, these are pretty high level Division I programs, and these kids started at they were playing Division III baseball the year before, right? So there's some really, really high level players at D3. Yes, the back end of that roster, there's probably that fit for the player that you're talking about. We just don't have a roster of 35 of that player, right? So you get these really limited spots for an above average, really solid, good high school player, can play at the Division III level, but that player's on a roster with the other end that you're now looking at. Like, my number 1 pitcher was in the Cape last summer. My number 2 pitcher was in the NECBL from a small school in Vermont, right? Eric Sorella was just up here from Salve. He's got all kinds of talent on his roster. It was just in the College World Series. So that's Division III baseball. It looks very different than it did 10 years ago. So I think keeping that in mind when you kind of recommend that player.
Yeah, before I get to Trimp, I'll just add with that, I deal with a lot of coaches at the Division III level, and they all say really within 5 years, it's completely changed. There's plenty of guys throwing 90 on various teams, and it's just, and the high school kid just doesn't get it because they still want to play at UConn, which is fantastic, but they just don't realize how good Eastern is, and Endicott and Salve, and could go on and on. But Trim, to add to that, is there, when you're out looking at kids, which obviously you said this summer was even let's talk transfer guys, what are you looking for? Is it straight up just velo and size, and what would you say?
No, I mean, obviously, you work, like, I want to get back. Like, I want to make sure we understand what we're still trying to get high school guys by proving what we're doing. And to me, Mike said it best about the pitching side of things. I think I'm a better pitching recruiter than I am a hitting recruiter, and I didn't pitch. Because I always look for those values of throwing strikes, mixing speed. Some of my best All-Americans and regional guys have been the 78 to 85 mile an hour guys, and we have one right now who will be our Friday night guy that throws 88, but he's got the most elite changeup in the country, and he'll probably sign this year, and so, we're still out there looking for guys that have those values of skill. I mean, everybody goes hit with power, run, throw, and field. We'll never forget this. We always talked about hit with power, run, throw, and field. There's your 5 tools, your 4 tools. You go off those things. But, I just got done speaking about Isaiah Barquette in my last speech, who was a Florida kid. His dad was the hitting coach for the Red Sox. He's an All-American player at NC State, then got in pro ball and was a player and coach. Well, he wanted his kid to go to NC State. He went there and had like 7 at-bats because he just doesn't have any power. He's my most valuable player because he's the most competitive guy I've ever coached. He doesn't strike out. He runs the clubhouse. He, takes care of every off-the-field problem. He's got all those other values that we look at recruiting-wise. So whether it's a transfer or a high school kid, the thing about the transfers is there's just so much more analytics.
Right.
And not so much exit velo and velocity, but like, can he do it when it was 3-2 count and the runner was on second base for the tie game? Can he do it in the classroom? Can he do it, when we have 6 a.m. practices? Like, that's the analytics that I don't know with the kid coming from South Carolina or New Jersey or Vermont. That's a really good player. He was the best player in that state. He was the all-state player. We get that. Like, we get the same calls. Like, hey, this is like a player that can play for you. But there's that other factor now that, it's not a mistake we make. It's just that sometimes the kids just don't acclimate well. And now I take that factor out by saying, all right, let's go in the portal. There's 400 of these guys. And I'll tell you what's happening to us is we're at the spot where we're getting the kids that went to the big time Power 4 school. Okay. We're the Jamie Arnolds, the Dylan Jacobs. He was a Florida State pitching coach. He was like, why did we let this guy go? And he's like our number 2, but he was like in the bullpen, and maybe the head coach or the pitching coach, not Chuck, but just in this example, would say, hey, look, you got a lot of work to do. And here's the problem. He really wants to tell a kid, look, man, you got to go. You got to do your work. Like, if you want to be the Friday night guy, you got to do this, this, and this, man. Like, you want to be a coach, right? Well, you know what happens? He calls his agent and said, this is what the guy says. And the agent says, that's too much risk. Let's call Trimper up at Stetson and let's go over there and be a weekend guy because it's your junior year, it's your draft year, and you're throwing 96, So, I mean, that's the thing that's happening is kids are falling into the agent world where they're being told, look, you got a 95 mile an hour arm. We have so many, you have a 95 mile an hour guy. Okay. That doesn't mean this kid's going to sign. They're a dime a dozen now as it goes. And so, but sometimes people see that and they try to say, well, look, he needs a chance. This 95 mile an hour guy is getting an unbelievable opportunity to play at Middlebury right now. What happens if he comes down to us and he doesn't have a good fall and he's throwing the ball at the backstop? It's like, I don't have time for that. I got the 88 mile an hour guy that's mixing. So that's the risk with the kids leaving a program that they're already established in. But there's so many variables out there for my level right now that allows me just to run to a summer league and watch 80 guys that all have had the analytics of they've done it somewhere, at some point.
The part that I think of when you were telling this before and now again is some of these very, very talented players with mid-90s fastballs that are in the Cape, but yet they want to leave where they're at. It shocks me that that guy is not happy. How can you throw 96 with a good slider and be leaving somewhere?
So we had a good year. We went 41 wins, went to a regional. His former team beat us, knocked us out. We didn't see Arnold, thank God, but the other guy was pretty good too. So, we had a really good year. We had a very older staff last year. We kind of built our staff off the transfer portal. I had 5th and 6th year guys, and they were all 88 to 91 right-handers that threw strikes. And we had great numbers. I mean, look at our numbers. They're really, really good. So I had to go out and get some transfers. So we went the JUCO route, of course, because we got a really good offensive club coming back. We thought. Didn't know at the time because we could lose 12 or we could lose 1. Who knows? But we did retain those guys. They came back. So now I'm like recruiting the Eastern Connecticut kid that ended up at Bryan. I like that as a reporter guy. I'm not even thinking about this. But then look what happened to me. All of a sudden, I got Tejada that signs with us from Florida State. I got a kid from Oregon who started game 2 of the Super Regionals. I got the Friday night guy at Indiana, and I got the Georgia Tuesday guy. Their agents called me on July 1st, pitching in the Cape. They need a spot. Not so much NIL. It's their draft year. And I'm like, okay. Like, it's like, we got to get those guys. Like, they're all, and now what's going to happen? The Georgia guy's going to start Saturday for us. My lefty's starting Friday. The Oregon guy's starting Sunday for me if we start today. And the Indiana guy's starting Tuesday for us. You know, like that's who we built our roster with those guys, you know. So
Now, just to follow up on that, is that Indiana guy was the Friday guy?
Yeah.
But he left there to come be your weekday guy.
Yep.
Is he just think he will get more coverage, more draft exposure?
He does, and I don't believe that because we got guys drafted in Maine that went in the 3rd round that are starting shortstop for the Astros right now that no one recruited. So, I mean, I still think if we had Matt Hyde here and these guys, you're going to get found no matter what. This is the one thing I get told now, and I'm a Northeast guy. It's the weather. The Oregon guy hated the weather there. He's from Canada. The Indiana guy, he's from Tampa. And he's like, I hate the weather. So that's why they came. It wasn't to be, hey, I'm going to set 30 more scouts in front of me. It's, you know, I'm going to be throwing, you know, live. He's doing it indoors next week. Northeastern just walked by. They're doing it. We're Monday. We're throwing, you know, outside. So I think that's the difference, which I never had in my career.
Right.
I had to throw in the dome, you know, but that is a reality. So.
And Donnie, from your perspective, what do you like when you're interacting with coaches about your players? Do you see any particular things they're always looking for? Is it again asking about the velos, or are they deep diving into characteristics, competitiveness, character, all that stuff?
I mean, again, I think it's a wide variety, right? And it depends on the level they're coming from to ask questions too. And one of the things that was really helpful and apparent for me was when I managed the New Britain Bees, seeing Division III guys compete with Division I guys before the portal went haywire. And then now that it is, it's like, all right, now the gap's getting even smaller. But like the guy that was at Middlebury that went to Cal was in New Britain as a D3 guy at that time, and he just took off, right? And so as we look at these guys, like when he came out of high school, he was a hidden gem. And so he gets to Middlebury because they were diligent and found him, where guys who are kind of coming out of my high school, they typically have an idea and a pathway and a lot of information. And so I think for the high school student, it's tough right now to hear where everyone can look and where you can find these guys, right? I have a kid right now who's for sure a Division I player, and he projects. And the reason I know that is because every time he goes to a camp, that coach calls, right, or texts, right? And it is. And if I have 5 guys go, how'd my guys do? This kid looked really good, right? And so it just, and that same crop went 5 years ago, 3 kids would be talked about, right? And it's just the scope is so much smaller at a Power 4 school. It's so much smaller. I mean, like you said, you have 95 on arm in Vermont. I graduated in 2011. We had one guy throwing 90, probably not really. You know, that was before Mike. There's no way. It just is a different beast. So when you have a kid that starts a Division III school, I think equipping yourself as a high school coach to prepare the family, to prepare the kid for that conversation, and then understand that now what's really nice of the one-way swinging door, maybe at a Division III level, is you can say to that family, hey, why don't you prioritize academics right now? Why don't you prioritize the price fit right now? Why don't you prioritize that this coach really likes you and he wants to develop you? Why don't you prioritize that right now and not worry about this division because you're there for next year, right? So from our end as a high school coach or a high school player, like you actually have some leverage in this too. So as scarce as it may seem and as terrifying as it might be for the average high school baseball player, if it's a borderline D1, D3 kid, like bet on yourself doesn't mean I'm betting on myself and I'm going to go pay more money to go to this Division I school. It's not going to develop me if I fail. Betting on yourself is betting on, hey, I can perform and develop for the right guy if he believes in me, right? And so if I have the time, and it's a product of, right, like Trimp's job pressure in Stetson's a little bit different than Mike's job pressure in Middlebury, right? Like, and I have to know that as a high school coach. My job pressure, I had shelved arms last year. I had the worst year I've ever had. Nobody talked to me about it, right? I'm a high school coach. Okay, I have a lot of ambition. I'm reloading. I'm ready to go, but that's my prerogative, right? And it's my time, and it's what I want to do because it's what I love, right? But my job security is not dependent on it. I don't feed my family based on how many wins I get. So the pressures and things, like, it's not totally a one-sided beast. So these guys aren't demons. Like, they're feeding their family because they've got to get kids drafted because that's the niche they're in, right? If Trent wanted to live up here and be in the Northeast and live at a prep school, like, he saw what that opportunity was, right? He chased it. And I was a GA for a bit. Like, I chased it. You make different decisions, right? And as high school players, you got to do the same thing. Like, choose your route for yourself and your family with your principles, not mine, right? Not your travel coaches, not your friends on Instagram. And then when you have a plan, don't watch what other people are doing too closely. That's the hardest part. And that's the thing I can't figure out. How do I get my players to stop listening to the kid in California whose season opens a month earlier in his on-ramping program? And I'm a Southern California kid. Like, I threw fewer baseballs than 98% of the Northeast pitchers do today. I guarantee it. I've had 0 arm surgeries, right? I threw footballs for 6 months a year, and I threw baseballs for 12 months a year. But I did not pitch. I was a closer at Middlebury. The moment I had a little bit of an arm issue, a little impingement in my shoulders, like, hey, I'm just going to stop pitching. I'm going to hit, and I'm going to play in the field. And so, like, you know, there's the avenue to kind of go different ways, but you've got to figure out, like, what your priorities are, because nobody in Southern California knew what Middlebury was at my public high school, right? And I had to figure that out because I had really cool parents with some circumstance that wanted to teach me what the Northeast was about because they were Pittsburghers, you know? So it's random, like, how you figure out your path.
All right, we're going to switch gears into a couple of things here. First of all, this in our text chain preparing for this trip educated me on what was confusing for a little bit with the JUCO thing with the kid, the quarterback from Vanderbilt. So correct me if I'm wrong, Trim. Anyone that is a 4-year player now in college that met these same circumstances as a junior college player gets their eligibility back. Any kid that is in high school cannot go to a junior college for a year or two, and that doesn't count eligibility-wise going forward, correct? Start there.
For today.
Okay, for today.
For today. So, yeah. So that was a big misconception, but everything's a big misconception. Basically, if you exhaust your eligibility this year, okay, so if you played 4 years and you're in your senior year and you were planning on going in the real world, but yet you played one of those years at a junior college in your career, you've just been granted next year. Right? That's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's it. It's not like I'm going to junior college next year. That's freebie. I'll use it in 2030. No. It's not a kid on your team right now that's a junior that we just got from junior college. No. It's just that case right now. Okay. And if somebody else wants to sue and somebody else wants to put it out there, then maybe you'll get it. But that's all that is for next year as you go forward.
All right. Now, in this next thing, I'm going to put it to you, and I'm making assumptions that, Chuck, at Navy, every player there does not pay, so there's not really scholarships or financial aid. And at Middlebury, no one gets baseball scholarships, so they get need-based and other types of merit money, et cetera.
Let's not denigrate that the people at Navy are serving our country.
I'm not that whatsoever. Did I do that?
They don't pay. I don't know how you quantify 5 years of service.
Of course.
Let's just keep that on.
Trust me.
I know. I'm just
but with
keeping a little levity here.
Trimp just coming off the ABCA. Trimp is in some high-level meetings. Like, so start with this. As of now, the rule is that it's a 34-man roster going forward in Division I. Yes or no?
Maybe.
Okay, so that's why I'm here and asking. Yes.
So, first off, to your point, yes, you have to have 34 people on your roster on December 1st
of 2025.
Of 2025. Okay, that's what we're going for. We just put a proposal so there's not unlimited recruiting in the fall, that we're going to see if we can get 4, not using this term, but think about taxi squad players. 4 people that would be making 38, but you have to be at 34. So there'll be 4 cuts if you choose to do that. If you choose to do that. Also, if you choose to do that, you're opening yourself up to lawsuit for cutting them because you brought them in and now they can't transfer to D1.
You can't have 50 to get down to 34.
You can.
Oh.
You want to.
But you got to get rid of these guys.
But you got to get rid of those guys. But we're hoping it goes to no 50. It goes to a 38-person roster. Now, to put muddier the waters in, and
Yes.
this is going well. You've heard about opting in and opting out. If your school chooses to opt into the House settlement, which will be out in April, then you follow these rules. If your school chooses to opt out, like this is too much, we don't want to be in this Power 4 thing, you can still have 40 kids on your team and not even worry about it.
But with that, if you opt out and your roster is higher, then you can only have 11.7 scholarships?
Correct. You follow under the old NCAA rules of 11.7. And what's being talked about, and it's probably going to happen because it's at high level, is the opt-in programs are going to eventually in the next 24 months just play each other. So if I'm an opt-in team as Stetson and your former school Sacred Heart is an opt-out team, I'll be like, hey man, I know we had a contract for 2028, but we can't play anymore. So that's where it's going to eventually get to. But I do want to bring up a point about this, okay? Because this is very confusing. There's a lot of things that are undecided yet.
Right.
Let's put it this way. But I want to talk to you about the roster limitations. Yes, that's going to happen at our level 34. Okay. And I make this point to my staff, and they thought I had a hole in my head. They're like, what? So my best teams at Maine and Manhattan College, before we had crazy rosters, and we had 30 guys back in 2010, 2015, 34 guys, 33 guys. I didn't have lockers back then. But you know what teams won the most? When Mike Conley was catching and pitching. When Luke Morrill started second and through game 3. When Chris Cody started first. And so my point is, I told my staff, I said, fellas, we had a staff meeting in the fall. I said, this is all new. We need two-way guys. And they're like, what? No way. They're going to get hurt. You can't do it. My pitching coach is like, I can't do that to him. It's too much money. I'm like, nope, this is what's going to be best. Our center fielder transferred from Florida. How crazy is this? I lost 2 kids last year in the transfer portal, and we gained 9. One kid just left. Okay, wasn't playing much, and he wanted to go someplace else. He walked on to a Power 4. Hopefully, he makes it. My center fielder got $200,000 to go to Florida. Okay, that's what happened. All right, he's an All-American, great player. But the Florida center fielder, who was their backup, was a sophomore. He's a JUCO Player of the year before, an Alabama kid. He was getting exit meetings done and was told, hey, look, you're going to get that spot next year. And by the way, this kid closes. He threw like 9-10 innings for him. So he leaves that meeting at the end of the World Series because Florida had a great run at the end. And he looks on Twitter that the Stetson center fielder did make the decision to go there. Mind you, that kid didn't want to go. He said, I'm coming back, coach. I'm coming back for 2 weeks. Then his agent kept calling me up in the number. And I was just like, can't do it. So the kid's like, I'm sorry, man. My agent's making me go. Crying to me. Love the experience at Stetson. That's where we're at, to be honest. Well, Landon Russell, he comes out of his meeting and he sees on Twitter Stetson center fielder All-American transferred. Who do you think the first person he called was? Me. So in theory, I switched center fielders this past year with the Florida kid, and the Florida kid's a junior, and he runs better, and he throws 94, and we pitched him all fall, and he's going to have meaningful innings for us. So my point is, Landon Russell to me was really attractive because he's a two-way guy, and I'm looking for two-way guys again, which we went away from the fast. So that's really outside the box. My 36-year-old recruiting coordinator and my 34-year-old pitching coach were like, you're crazy, Trevor. And I'm like, telling you, man, we need two-way guys. We need two-way guys because our rosters will be at 34, and we want to carry 4 catchers. You're crazy. Why do we want to carry 4 catchers? Because we got to have guys catch bullpens. All right? Well, we need to get a two-way catcher. We need a catcher infielder now. That's what's going to have to happen. So two-way guys, not just multi-position, but also pitch and catch. So.
And the thing I'm going to not get into, because we have 5 minutes, and I wanted to see if there were some questions maybe specifically for the different coaches. But the thing also, which you alluded to a little bit, is now how NIL is affecting the recruiting process for you, and then revenue sharing, that's coming down the pike as well. But we may get to that if there's no questions. But for these different coaches, anyone in the audience have a particular question they would like to ask? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I love the question. I'm sitting here listening to Trip talk, and my head is spinning, and I'm like, I am so glad I coach at the level that I coach at, because I can't follow any of that. And I think, like, one of the things just to emphasize, like, folks who've sat and listened to this, like, there's a ton up here, and I think we've meandered through, like, a lot of different topics related to recruiting. And if you're leaving here being like, it's complicated, it is complicated. And I think that the majority of the college baseball experiences, I think, right, like more closely mirror like what we're offering, like the Division III experience. There's a ton of Division III schools. There's a lot of Division I schools who are not, lucky enough to swap center fielders with Florida. Like, I think like the average experience does come down to fit. The hard part is that I think a 16, 17-year-old, young man, and all of us can go back to that place, for lack of a better word, they're morons, right? Like they look at the world through their 17-year-old eyes. They're not aware of what the college experience will look like when they're 22 and how they'll reflect back on it. So like, yes, fit is important, but fit is only as important as the perspective of that kid who's making that decision. So when we do really well, we do have the chance to like talk to a prospective student and their family, and they do have an informed lens at looking like, what does a 4-year experience look like with a coach who's probably going to be there for my 4 years, who's invested in me as a person, who's going to help me grow and develop and become a better version of myself. Yes, athletically. Yes, academically. And you know what? I'll be, less of a moron when I graduate because of these people. I also think like the experience of being on a team, like ask anyone who's played college sports, and the first thing they're going to tell you with the value with it is the people that they played with, right? Like there's no other answer that people will give. It's like those relationships, those experiences with your teammates. I'm in 2 group chats with like UConn teammates, and like it's endless like amusement reflecting back on like times being in college, and it's not endless conversations about the 7th inning against Georgetown. Coach Penner's head probably spins when he thinks about Georgetown my freshman year, which was not a good memory at UConn. But I think like players who have that informed lens, they are a fit for a program in that 4 years. At the same level, I think fit might look differently for someone who's like, look, this is going to be really competitive. Like you better know what you're signing up for and be able to handle the pressure that you're going to be under. And some people will rise to that and thrive under it, and they'll thrive under certain coaching styles. But I think fit for us looks a little bit different because that informed lens of wanting to be a part of a 4-year program.
And I was going to just ask Chuck first, but then Trip, I want to cut you off. Knowing with Navy, like you must have some kids that were born, they want to go to Navy, and then other kids, you make one phone call and they want nothing to do. Is there a middle ground where you can sell a kid and get a kid to see if he fits into the Navy?
I think you just educate them. I would say probably selling is a bit too far. I like to present what it is, and the reality is it's an Ivy League caliber education coupled with the greatest leadership experience you can have from 18 to 22. I believe it. I wouldn't coach there if I did. But I think just because you feel destined to have a career in the Navy may not necessarily make you a fit for our baseball program. Right. And I think that's a narrative we are often combating, where, yes, you have the players you want that may have a limited interest in the totality of the Navy experience. But the other side of that is just because my dad was an officer or an admiral, we are living a competitive world. It's like, I don't want to, Mike or I or anybody, we don't want to win any less than Trimp does. We don't want to get any lesser players. So I think that is often a difficult conversation where you have to gauge, are you just using me as your ticket into the academy? And at the same time, if you're going to be a part of our team, we need to be able to meet our performance standard because it is Division I baseball and we're competing for the same championships everybody else is. So that's a bit delicate. Most of our roster, maybe we didn't talk into coming to the Naval Academy, but when we presented the totality of the experience, they got to Annapolis and said, I get it. I get what this is about. And they bought it. And I think they're happy they did.
Wrap it up here.
Yeah. I mean, the fit, to answer your question, for me, it changes. It could be a 3-year fit or a 1-year fit, depending on my roster. Our basketball team went to the NCAA tournament last year and played UConn, and Donnie Jones did a hell of a job. First time ever, 16 kids transferred. So he had no team right afterwards, and they loved it. Gone. All 16 kids were gone, all right, because they paid out. One kid got $400 to go here and all those things. I'm going in the regionals last year, hold on. Like, I want to really enjoy this, but what's going to happen next week in my meetings? How much do I have to rate? So my point is like, as coaches, we said this morning, I have to do a much better job of those relationships. I was really excited that everybody wanted to come back, except for the kid that really couldn't. How do you turn down 200? I had to be like, yeah, sorry, man. Like, I would love to have you. And there's no coach besides maybe 10 of us that don't want 4-year players or 3-year players. Jimmy and I talked. He went and won the won a regional, and he was playing Florida, who we lost to, Florida State. So we talked, and then I remember him saying, "Holy cow, what's going to happen next week?" And so this is so new to us. So I don't know, even this year, I don't know if the draft is going to take our guys. I don't know if the freshmen come in and they play so good and the money gets even better and they leave. And now I'm scrambling, trying to get his players, his in the portal. And I don't want to do that. I want to get 4-year guys or high school guys that come in. I develop them. I play them as freshmen. We now get them stronger. We take our lumps for a couple of kids and they grow. But it's going to be my responsibility to make them try to be like, nah, I'm not taking 80 to go to Ohio State. Nah, I don't need to go to Kansas. Like, I like what I got. And so I think as coaches, we have to do that with relationships, which we talked about this morning. But.
Yeah, and then as the advisor too, like you just give the information, right? You can't you say, hey, I think this is the best fit, but you can present 2 opportunities, one in which the kid's not going to necessarily fit, but the family chooses that situation when the fit is better here. And those are sometimes the hardest conversations a high school coach to have with maybe your alma mater, who's offered 2 of my guys who have not chosen Middlebury. And both opportunities they would have played right away, and both opportunities they didn't do very well right away as freshmen, the other opportunity. It's like, hey, and I'm biased. I'm like, here's my Middlebury banner. I can't even, it's you just present the information, you do what you can, and then everyone tries to find the fit.
All right, let's wrap it there. Our time is up. Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.